Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we're taking a look at the newest big bad dropping tonight in Marvel Snap, and that is High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary is a 4-cost, 4-power that reads, at the start of the game, unlock the potential of all your cards with no abilities. So this is really cool. People have been pretty hyped from this card. He was initially a 4/7 in the data mine as well as the trailer for the season. However, it's been clarified that he has been changed to a 4/4. 4/7 seemed a little crazy. 4/4 seems kind of bad, but you're not really playing the High Evolutionary to play him. You're playing him to play all these other cards. So let's quickly run through what the cards do here that he changes, and then let's talk about if this is a worthy purchase or not. So cards, Wasp, they all maintain their normal stats, but they get some abilities. Wasp is a on reveal, flick 2 random enemy cards here with -1 power. Misty is when you end a turn with unspent energy, give another friendly card +1 power. Shocker is on reveal, give the leftmost card in your hand -1 cost. Cyclops is when you end a turn with unspent energy, afflict 2 random enemies here with -1 power. The Thing, on reveal, afflict a random enemy card here with -1 power, repeat 2 more times. Abomination, costs 1 less for each enemy card in play that's afflicted with negative power. And Hulk, ongoing, +2 power for each card for each turn you ended with unspent energy. So 2 main themes here being negative power and floating energy, not using all the energy you have access to in a turn. So the kind of cool thing about this is, yes, you can build a deck with all of these things going on at once, but you can also break this up into smaller packages and lean more into either the negative power or the not spending all your energy direction. So that's really cool with this card. I think a big reason people are excited about this is because it feels a little bit like Thanos in the sense that it's one card that kind of enables a lot of new different archetypes to experiment with. So bang for buck there in terms of the amount of decks you can probably use this in, pretty high. He's also a quote-unquote big bad. So this card for this foreseeable future will not be dropping from Series 5. So you can feel a bit more secure in that 6,000 token purchase, as there are no plans to rotate this card currently. So with that all out of the way, is this card worth buying? I think it is, mainly because of that big bad status and the fact that it's giving very powerful effects to a lot of these cards. I think there's going to be probably multiple High Evolutionary decks that pop up, and they may even do pretty different things. If you're on the fence about this one, my best advice would be just wait a few days, because it's not like it's going down in price, so you don't need to be really in a rush to get it. But if you're unsure about this, especially after the stat change that the card itself got, I would just wait a few days and see how it's kind of panning out. I think a lot of people would have benefited from doing that with Kang, because that's a card people bought up because he was a big bad, and then a lot of people ended up not liking him. So if you're on the fence about this one, maybe wait a few days and see what people start coming up with and how the impact's looking to see if it's really worth your tokens. But if you are interested in this kind of deck archetype, this is probably a pretty easy buy, as this is not a card you can replace. It's doing a very, very unique thing, much like Thanos, where it's enabling kind of totally different gameplay than you would otherwise get with a whole bunch of cards. It's kind of like this one card is 7 cards in one. So very value there in terms of different cards you get to play with. So definitely think this is probably a pretty solid buy. I would be very surprised if even with the stat reduction that this card doesn't end up finding a home somewhere in the meta, even with the recently buffed Luke Cage, which might be there to kind of counter some of these negative stat afflictions. So probably one of the easier purchases I would recommend, but if you're on the fence, maybe wait a few days and see how it starts playing out after the card is actually live. So let's talk decks for High Evolutionary. Got quite a few of them here. The first one we're looking at is just a Afflict deck, but we're kind of just trying to do everything the High Evo cards want to do in this deck. We're running like all the cards, and it's possible this might not be the best version, but we aren't going to know till we try it. It is confirmed that things like Scorpion, Spider-Woman, locations, all those things do feed into the affliction for the Abomination cost reduction. So we're trying to afflict our opponent's stuff with a bunch of negative stuff, and we're trying to float mana, so we are pumping up our Hulk, getting a cheaper She-Hulk, getting the Sunspot big. I think this deck just, it almost felt like it built itself. You just throw in High Evo, you throw in the High Evo cards, and you don't actually have a whole ton of space left, so we just put in some more cards that feed the theme in Scorpion and Spider-Woman, Sunspot and She-Hulk, and then we call it a day. I think this one definitely going to be a bit more vulnerable to the Luke Cage stuff, and we're actually going to look at a High Evo deck that runs Cage himself for mirror matches in a bit, so that's one thing you can consider if you're seeing a lot of the mirror, but I do think the cards are going to be powerful enough on their own, and this negative affliction might be a little bit underrated. I think it's actually really powerful. I know a lot of people don't really play Spider-Woman, but I've played a lot of that card since she got buffed, and you'd be surprised how much of a difference that negative affliction can make, especially when so many cards in our deck are able to get it off, and now we have more of a payoff for it, getting a very cheap Abomination. So if you're looking to just go all in with everything you can do with the High Evolutionary, this is probably a pretty decent direction to go with it. This next version, we do take a few notes from the Only Stats deck here with Stature, Black Bolt stuff going on, but we are still going with the theme of negative power, kind of putting the mana, not spending all your mana theme on the side, not running those cards in this version. This is all about reducing the power in your opponent's cards. Luke Cage to stop the opponent from being able to do that to us. Jeff, just a little bit of flexibility, not really necessarily core to this deck. He's just a really good card, so we put him in, but definitely replaceable with another 2-drop or 3-drop. Killmonger was kind of my tech card of choice. A lot of powerful 1-drops going around, especially with Kitty Pryde. So having a way to kind of deal with that and Nebula and whatnot, I think warrants the inclusion, and we were a little bit light on 3-drops, so helps out there as well. But you could also consider another tech card in that spot, such as Shang-Chi or Enchantress, but I liked that Killmonger is 3 mana because that was kind of one of our weaker spots in the curve aside from Cyclops. The Thing and High Evo being our 4-drops. Stature, Black Bolt stuff, we can either go the Black Bolt route or the Spider-Woman route, going into the final turn, or going to turn 5 for the final turn, and they dodge Shang-Chi. Like, pretty much most of our deck dodges Shang-Chi. It's really just the Abomination we have to be a little careful for, and we might be holding that for the final turn anyway, since we'll be able to play it probably whenever we want, because we have such a big critical mass of afflict effects to make sure that is very, very cheap. So this one I think will be good in the mirror because of the Luke Cage, and just against decks that try and spam a lot of cards on the board. Another interesting direction you can go in here is this Shuri style shell. I think too many people moved away from Shuri a bit too quickly. There's also been a bit less Shang-Chi, or at least that's been my experience, since everyone's been trying out Enchantress in that spot in a lot of decks. So there is kind of less hate for the really big stuff. And I found just some of the cards from the Shuri deck fit pretty nicely in this style of deck because they support the theme of not using all your energy with things like Sunspot and She-Hulk. Spider-Woman, really nice to get Shuri'd, 16 power, also reduces the opponent's stuff. Taskmaster's nice to copy if we're able to juice up our She-Hulk, Abomination, or Spider-Woman. Just feels like it made a lot of sense in this style of shell. We're using armor for a bit of protection because Shang-Chi does exist, Killmonger does exist, they are still around. But if you're looking for a version of High Evo that really has kind of the most points of power possible, I think Shuri is a very decent direction to go with it. And now we've reached the Lockjaw section of the decks. So I was initially very excited for kind of a Lockjaw Thanos wave deck. And obviously the wave stuff got changed because apparently it would have been pretty overpowered, it sounds like. But I think these Lockjaw decks can still work. So we're going to look here. We have a non-Thanos version, then we do have a Thanos version, which actually has 2 variations of it, depending on your preference, how much you want to lean into the High Evo stuff. This first version, though, is not Thanos. It's just a regular old Lockjaw, so we have some big things we're trying to cheat out. We are more so leaning into the energy theme on this one rather than all the afflict things, but we do have just a handful of afflict things, so that way we can kind of justify running the Abomination. Wasp we would be running anyway in a Lockjaw deck, so we just get the afflict as a bonus. Shocker is really nice because it helps support our mana strategy here and not spending all our mana every turn, and we can just throw it into the jaw. Obviously, Sunspot's good with that strategy as well because he benefits from us not using it all every turn. The thing is just, we could use a 4-drop and having a little bit more redundancy on these afflict effects to make the Abomination cheap seems good. Same with Spider-Woman, dodges Shang-Chi, helps fuel our Abomination. Chavez, because we really do want the draw consistency in this deck, where we will be hopefully getting our Lockjaw and other early game cards a bit more often. She-Hulk naturally goes very well with Sunspot and Floating Energy. The Hulk can get really big popping out of that Lockjaw if we are skipping on that energy during a lot of our turns. And it felt natural to put the Infinite in here because I feel like a lot of people don't expect it anymore. It's a really big high roll out of Lockjaw, and it's just kind of taking people by surprise. I think a lot of people are used to the skip into She-Hulk, but you don't see the Infinite much nowadays, so I think you can definitely catch some people off guard by skipping into an Infinite sometimes if you don't happen to pull it out of your Lockjaw. Next up, we have a Thanos version, so this one's leaning on High Evo a lot less. We are able to run Hulk as a payoff. We're all in on kind of the energy reduced theme here. Really, the Wasp was just there for the Lockjaw. Other than that, we aren't really using any other afflict stuff. This is all about just the fact that we can float some energy and get some benefits from it from both Hulk, She-Hulk, and Shocker, helping us maintain that kind of playing off curve to fuel our other stuff. I'm kind of unsure about how Thanos is going to end up going, but I do think generally you are going to want to be pretty light on the High Evo cards in here. Could be wrong about that, but we already have so many other things in the deck to kind of roll into that are small. We don't draw our stones, so it feels like putting a lot of the High Evo cards in here doesn't have quite as much benefit, but I do think that they do provide some benefit to where it is worth experimenting with. Another version of this deck, it actually has even less High Evo cards. This goes away from the energy theme directly, and this just says, hey, we're playing this because it gets us a really big thing in the Hulk, and Shocker's not that bad to throw into Jaw and act as another form of mana cheap, much like the Time Stone. So this is a lot closer to the standard version of the Thanos Lockjaw deck, and I think this might end up being the better version of it, but again, only time will tell. We really do only have, 4 cards here, 3 if you don't count High Evo, but I do think it could still be worth an inclusion, because sometimes we do just end up floating mana in the Thanos deck, and you really only need to float it once or twice to have a really big Hulk. So I don't think that's too big of an ask to accomplish. Other than that, we're just running a lot of the other good cards in a Lockjaw Thanos deck. Devil Dino, because our hand's usually full. Chavez for consistency, and another big thing to pop out of the jaw. The Arrow Odin stuff, I think, has been pretty underrated, and obviously really good with wave. Sometimes we can wave out Odin, and then close it out with an arrow, and it just makes all the kind of spam a lot of card stacks cry, particularly Bounce, which has been a very popular and successful archetype recently. So if you're looking for getting a bit of an edge on those style of decks, this might be the better version of Thanos to go with. There we have it, all our decks for the High Evolutionary. I am super pumped to try this card out, so much fun stuff to experiment with. Definitely looking forward to it, going to be playing a lot of it once it drops tonight. I'd love to hear from you though. What are you excited to try out with this card? I think we're going to see people try so many different things, and I can't wait to see which of the kind of packages end up pulling out ahead, or if it's just worth to slam all these High Evo cards just in one deck and call it a day. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. As always, deck links will be in the description if you want to import any of those. And if you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.